Alright everyone, it's an early day here, which is good because I think it's supposed to be ungodly hot and humid later. And it's like my allergies, they're acting up a little bit. By the way, foot update, that's healing just fine. I got some Watkins salve and shit for that. So it's going to be interesting. No, I'm not going to put it on YouTube. It'd probably get banned for it because, blood, oh my god. No, we can't show people the reality that is a wound. But I figured it was time to talk about a fundamental concept here. And it takes off of one concept that I've seen echoed by others. Like I think Dapperton specifically mentioned this first in my mind, which is that there's a difference between the concept of like the First Amendment, the legal side of free speech, the actual First Amendment here in the US or some similar arrangement elsewhere. There's a difference between that and actually free speech in a pragmatic sense. Elaborating on that, I would say that if there are significant enough repercussions for expressing unpopular opinions, because you have a pitchfork-wielding mob sort of society of morally haranguing soccer moms and pearl clutchers, free speech, while it exists in the capacity of constraining government from throwing you in jail for saying something, free speech in the pragmatic sense still does not exist. Why? Because people will begin to self-censor. Therefore, the most important of all is the retention of the alt media at this point. That's another conclusion that I've come to. Specifically because of this. People who have 9-to-5 jobs and take part in what you would consider normal human activities can't speak as freely if they have, any out there or fringe or odd opinions, offensive opinions according to whatever establishment exists. They can't really fight back against that ably. Like, I know people. I've talked to them through messages. I'm never going to say this in a public commenting space, but anonymously, in privacy, that is, in confidence. I've known this, that some people literally do self-censor. They're like, yeah, I believe I'm like a libertarian or something, but my family is all liberals or they're all like Bible thumpers, so I don't even bring up politics. I don't talk about it. It's basically the same concept, only it's that on a societal level. Other people have told me that as well, like basically, well, I have this certain belief, I follow a certain religion, I have certain views. I don't dare talk about them in public. I'm not going to make a YouTube video about them because I might lose my job. My boss is, of different faith, of a different whatever, a different political affiliation. My family might disown me. My friends all disagree with me. I might get kicked off of the other sites that I use if I make a video or a blog post or something about some topic. That, my friend, is not free speech. Very few people are at liberty to really say what they feel. I am, because I'm not beholden. I don't have a 9-to-5. I don't really care about the social side of things, and the people around me have been specifically chosen because they're very permissive of other people's ideas and aren't going to get randomly pissed off. And for most people, that's not the case. So the alt media at this point, unfortunately, I would say in some cases, centralizing as though it is really the vanguard of free speech, because it's comprised, at least partly, of people who are sort of exempt from the pitchfork-waving mob. It's like when I first got on YouTube, the biggest thing was religion. That is, if there was a pitchfork-waving mob, a debate going on, anything like that, any animus, people rating one another, whatever, calling people names, it was religiously related. It wasn't really politics. Early wave YouTube, religion was very common as a subject. It was sort of the philosophical side of YouTube was mostly spiritual. Now it's political and it's news related, and that's where like the Wall Street journals and the BuzzFeeds and the Atlantics are focusing because that's where they're being competed with. Didn't really care as long as it was mainly philosophical and social debate over spiritual things, because they don't really talk about that so much. So back then, really, you have like maybe the Mormon church is going to try to raid you or something. It's very funny. And people would self-censor about that too. That past sort of mini moral panic with regards to religion's alternative to Bible-thumping Protestant Christianity, as other people began weighing in on the World Wide Web, so to speak, it really angered them. It really got them hot under the collar. Because for the first time, some of these people who, before the mid-90s, public internet's not really a thing. It's an academic thing. If your essay was basically like the equivalent of early Facebook when it was just for college kids, that was the early internet, until I believe it was 1994. And even then, it isn't really until like the early 2000s that most people begin to have internet access in their homes. Like for me, it was 2007 because I was a poor kid. You know, for the middle class, it was like, you know, it's 2000. I got my XP going or something. I got this old Windows 95. Sometimes it even works. Windows ME, ooh, it's so great. Or one of those weird computers with the funny colors that had like the round back that Apple released, and it was parodied on like Foxtrot and all the other cartoons, how funny they looked and how they were anything but a powerful machine. And just think they were really advanced for the time. That's the funny bit. The Chia Pet era. I can remember though, in that early wave, it was really about religion. People would debate over it, and a lot of people didn't want to weigh in if you asked them, well, you know, what religion are you? Oh, I'm not talking about that. It's not going to happen. Now that's become passé. Nobody really cares as much about that. I see more of a togetherness because people have begun to break down along political lines so much that they find themselves having weird bedfellows with regards to religion. Like I'm talking to people who are hyper-religious Protestants sometimes, or like Fuentes, he's a religious Catholic. But we're ultimately on the same side. We're ultimately fighting for the same goal simply because of the political breakdown of the Western world. Whereas 10 years ago, if we were both on YouTube, we probably would have been sparring, and I think he would have been too young to be on YouTube 10 years ago. It's actually hilarious to me. And this happens over and over again, like, you know, talking to people who have religious views that are totally different. Even certain political views, like people who are like ethno-nationalistic, or even someone who's like a progressive, but ultimately they're sort of in the same boat. If they're part of the alt media, they're being abused at this point. I pointed out with Progressive Voice the other day. He had a video about demonetization. He's like, well, you know, I uploaded this test video. It's got the letter A is the title. It has no description or tags. It still gets demonetized as soon as it's up. In other words, literally, it does not matter what he uploads. He'll get instantly demonetized. Has to manually have everything reviewed to get any monetization at all. And I pointed out, yeah, because the second stage of abusing the alt media is now here. The first stage was to make it look partisan so that people like you who are on the left wouldn't cry foul. So that you would abandon the free speech, you know, appreciation stuff in favor of, well, it's just aimed at those extremists over there. Limited state fundamentally was about this too. Now, though, now that they've turned it into a partisan debate, they can suppress everybody. And it's sort of like boiling the frog. And it'll be slow in coming. It'll impact one person after the other. And pretty soon, any political voice on YouTube won't be making any money off AdSense. That is what will happen. I strongly suggest people stop relying upon it altogether because it's no longer a stable thing. And part of it, I pointed this out as well, part of it is simply a lot of people withdrew putting ads on YouTube, therefore there weren't enough ads to go around. They had to demonetize somebody. So who do you think gets demonetized? Someone with 1 million subscribers or somebody with 50,000? There's a reason that they cut off anyone who is under 1,000 subscribers. Because now they've compacted those ads back in a little bit so that people at the top don't get totally butt flustered and they can still kind of make a living. And even then they have problems. They're probably going to do another wave of that and cull people below like 5 or 10,000 at some point. By the way, if you've got less than 5,000 subs, again, you probably aren't making much anyway, but they should at least be honest with their user base. Like, it doesn't affect me. It might be necessary, but it'll tell people that. I think most people would understand, at least, on YouTube. But offending people is necessary. If you can't offend people, you don't have free speech. What's the difference between a government being able to imprison you or a pitchfork-waving mob that's promulgated in part by that same government? By the way, you see like a Maxine Waters all the time saying this sort of shit, encouraging you to be deplatformed financially, to have your friends and family disown you, to get you, kicked out of your job, to get you kicked out of your apartment. It's like, we don't serve Nazis here, even if you're a libertarian or a progressive or something. It's the same shit. What's the difference? Either way, your life is ruined. Like, getting thrown in prison is mild compared to some of the stuff that some of these people are suggesting. They're suggesting that because you wore a MAGA hat, anyone who sees you on the street should punch you and you shouldn't be able to make a dime. So you're going to be homeless. The only thing you're going to have is your fucking MAGA hat. You're going to need it and use it as a blanket at some point. I would say that's more draconian than throwing someone in the clink for a week for saying the wrong thing. And it's totally anathema to the very concept of free speech. Free speech goes beyond the First Amendment. The First Amendment is the government can't fuck you over for saying something merely offensive or that they happen not to like. They can't throw you in jail for sedition, in other words. That's the First Amendment. But then again, you've also got the concept of free speech, the concept that people should get together, speak, debate, they should use reason, there shouldn't be pitchfork waving mobs, and people should use logic and what was then, considered sort of Enlightenment era mental tactics to break down arguments and foment ideas. That's what our founders believed in. That's sort of the sign of the times that they happen to live in. So when people say, well, the founders never intended for people to be able to say X, Y, and Z, yes, they did. Explicitly, they did, just like they explicitly wanted them to have military weapons. They wouldn't care. Trust me, the founders, if they were alive today, would be encouraging us to scrap the ban on automatic weapons being manufactured. They'd say, hey, it's standing in the way of a free market commercial situation. It makes no sense. Yeah, you should be able to make all sorts of good machine guns. People should be able to own rocket launchers if they want. That may be less pragmatic and less strictly small arms, but it's what would have happened. The right to privacy absolutely would exist online, and it would extend to corporations that are handling communication. Of course it would. That was sort of the point. Because they used reason, they would understand that it would be a problem if they didn't. That's about all. Peace out.